Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lethal Weapon as well as the latest episode of Bull. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Lethal Weapon, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Bull. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Lethal Weapon. A very good episode this week. We had the return of Leo, which is crazy because Leo was only in one episode last season, but now he's popped. This is his third or fourth time popping up this season. Either it's just because the people behind this show just love Thomas Lennon, which no surprise there. It could be that, or it's just because he's easily become a fan favorite. Because I feel like there hasn't been any other character that's been this recurring, within the show. So I don't know what the circumstances are, but Leo's return to the show is because he's getting married, interestingly enough, and talking about Roger being his best man. He's like, "I'm not your best man." He's like, "Yeah, well, you're my good friend," and it's like, you're a male friend that I have, and it's like, okay. But thanks with Leo's SO, his future soon-to-be wife, Nina, things are complicated because it's like, oh, she hasn't shown up. We haven't seen her since last night. She took a whole bunch of money. It's like, oh, it's not looking good. Then, you have Riggs and Roger checking it out. And it's like, oh, they find a dead body at her place. It's a hitman dude with a hitman dude. I don't know why that sounds so funny to me. With a stiletto in his head. I was like, that's a pretty brutal way to go out. Long story short, we ended up finding out that Nina had cocaine on her and everything. I know, hard cut to that and everything. I mean, not hard cut within the show, but hard cut in me talking about it like this. It's actually kind of interesting because basically she stole the cocaine from another kind of well-known kind of crime person. Because she wanted to sell it so that her and Leo could have money. Because it's like, oh, we're going to run away together. And it's like, because legitimately, I'm sure everyone else had the idea of oh man, she was just using Leo and stuff. Especially because they've only been dating for 6.5 weeks. Leo kept emphasizing that a lot. And I just loved him just coming out and just be like, oh, boo boo. And at one point, Bailey's looking at him. He's like, just don't look at me. It's like, oh, Leo, you're a mess, dude. But for him, it's just kind of like, oh my God, I doubted you. But it's like, no, you love me. Like I said, just wasn't expecting it. I thought that whole story was going to be she's pretending to love him and everything. I was like, oh, it's part of some act or whatever. But no, legitimately, she feels that way about him. To the point that they were literally about to have sex before she kind of got dragged off by the cop later on in the episode. Because it's like, oh, we literally only have 5 minutes. And Leo's like, well, I already took the pill, and they're literally starting to get undressed, and she's on top of him, and you have Riggs being like, okay, just text me the address that he's trying to get it. So interesting circumstances. It does seem like things kind of work out luckily for them. Because I saw Phil Lamar's name, and I was like, oh, wow, I guess he's going to play a bigger part in this episode. It's like, nope. He literally pops up at the very end of the episode as the judge that, gets to marry, essentially. It's like, oh, he's like, baby, I'd go to the ends of the earths for you. And it's like, it's legitimately, it's beautiful. It's a complicated situation, but hey, we've seen relationships like theirs kind of prosper before. Great example is, God, I'm blinking on her name, and I recently went back and started rewatching Psych. Lassiter and his was it Marlene? Is that her name? It was something like that. His girlfriend, eventually wife. Don't they get married? I don't remember. I think in the last season they get engaged or married. I don't remember the circumstances. Nevertheless, his significant other kind of going through the same thing. So that's sweet. I don't know. It's just kind of oh, I'm happy for you, Leo. It's like, yeah. She kind of accepts you for who you are. I mean, it is kind of interesting at one point in the episode, you kind of had to be your fiance's lawyer in a sense, but it's like, hey, two peas in a pod type of situation. Nevertheless, a big part of this episode, which kind of connects inadvertently to the whole Leo situation, is the situation between Molly and Riggs. There's basically the entire thing ends up turning out that Molly's actually in contact with Jake, which she didn't tell Riggs, which Riggs had her tailed because it was a protective detail, but he didn't talk to Molly about it, even though Bailey was like, yo, you should do that. But Riggs kind of was like, I got this relationship stuff. You don't know what you're talking about, Bailey. And Molly proceeds to be pissed at him because how many people know? wait, Bailey knows? How many people knows? It's like, well, there's a uni I put on you, probably the dispatcher, hard cut to her hanging up, and it's like, okay, yeah, she had a right to be pissed about that. It's like, because, I mean, and it's something her and Riggs kind of go at it about, too, because, like, they both keep secrets from each other because they're trying to protect each other. He's just trying to protect her because, obviously, the last situation with his dad made him a little scared, but for him, it's like, I want me to be the one to worry about it. I don't want Molly to kind of have to stress about it. I just want her to relax. So, you have the best of intentions. And the situation with Jake, it's because Molly basically wanted Jake to kind of, like, be there for his son. Like, turn yourself in so you can actually have a relationship with your son. Giving back the promise ring and everything. Because part of me was also thinking maybe that was kind of like her needing money or something like that. But it turns out that's not the case. Like, that's what that was all about. Because she didn't want to have to put Riggs in that compromised position again of like having to choose between duty and his friend. Like, he let Jake go before. And it's like, well, would you kind of do the same thing? Like, I wouldn't want to have to put you in that position again. So... But it turns out, because Jake's trying to spin it like, oh, I'm here, to see my son. But it's like, nope, he actually came here for a job. And that's kind of sad because it inadvertently, it's like, yeah, Jake's kind of like, I guess I can't change. Which immediately my brain goes, I wonder, is that supposed to be kind of referencing, the whole situation with Riggs' dad too? Because Riggs' dad seems like he potentially has changed. Well, because it's like, well, look at Jake, even given under these circumstances, given another chance by Riggs, he still came back, claiming it to be for his son, but really it's just a job. So a leopard can't change its spots, type of situation. So that, I'm wondering, is that going to be something that kind of influences Riggs' decision about his whole dad situation going forward? I mean, it may not, but I think it is something to kind of keep in the back of your mind if, like, Jake can't change in that short amount of time. I mean, to be fair, Riggs hasn't seen his dad in years, so who's to say his dad, I don't know, like, the whole dog situation, I don't know. Maybe it is true that he got the wrong people to do it, but I was like, I don't know, I kind of feel like, I think it's something that Riggs is probably going to have to find out the hard way, that his dad is still kind of the asshole that he was before, but hey, ultimately we'll kind of have to wait and see on that, but I did like that whole situation with Riggs and Jake kind of going into that tussle in that ball pit, and the lady's just looking at him like all those kids around. She's just like, you two should be ashamed of yourself. And even when it was all said and done, that just him kind of laying back because Jake's kind of throwing it in his face. It's like, you just took everything from me. You took my wife, you took my son, and telling him it's not going to last. Kind of even reiterating it. But for Riggs, he's like, maybe it won't, but maybe it will. And it's like, that's kind of interesting hearing you say that. Because you never really hear Riggs be super positive about, like, very optimistic about a relationship. Even with Palmer, he was kind of like, I mean, obviously he was never very open, but the fact is that he outwardly says that, even goes as far as saying, it's like, because Jake's like, well, how do you know? And it's like, because I love her. And you don't really see Jake kind of reacting in a negative way. Like, even when he's got being taken away, you see Jake kind of like smirking a little. But I think it's a situation of like, that I guess when it's all said and done, like, yeah, he might have his problem with Riggs and stuff like that, but he realizes that everything that happens between him and Molly and Ben, like, specifically Jake, like, realizing that, that's all on him. And it's like, as long as, like, maybe Riggs is happy and as long as Molly's happy and Ben's taken care of, then he's okay with those circumstances, I guess. I mean, plus this does mean that he potentially can be nearby, have a relationship with his son again, potentially, I think. So I think that's kind of a silver lining to kind of draw from that situation. Now, whether or not Jake will necessarily see it like that, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But that's just kind of Riggs' side of things, which it does seem like things between him and Molly are getting better. And I like his whole aspect of looking at it. It's like, oh, like, we make a mess. And he's like, well, maybe that's kind of our thing, that we are kind of like a perfect mess together. Like, they've both kind of got their own issues, but at the end of the day, they care very deeply for each other, Which is, it was good to see him, even like him and Molly being where they are now. I guess kind of having slightly resolved the situation between him and his dad. I think it did, like, legitimately, it does seem like they were giving this a second go. So, I mean, like any couple, they have their issues. So that was just kind of a nice touch. And I'm very interested to see, like, how that all progresses going forward. You hope it works out. Because you even have Bailey being like, don't lie to her, like, talk to her about it. Because, like, I like Molly. And I think that's because that was kind of Bailey being like, I don't want you doing anything stupid and screwing up this relationship, because it's like Molly's like a super cool person, so. But on the other side of the episode, you had the whole situation with Roger ends up seeing a pregnancy test in the trash, and he immediately thinks it's Trish, especially because she's not drinking, she's not eating this and that. It's like, oh, she must be pregnant. And the entire time he's stressing about it. And that's something that kind of comes up in the episode of like, oh yeah, man, like maybe we'd be better off not knowing. Maybe there's some points in life we should be more ignorant. It's kind of interesting because literally when Riggs was talking about being ignorant about things, like, oh, I don't need to know who the person is in the car, he later on bumps, while working the case, ends up inadvertently finding out the person that was in the car was Jake. So it's just like, even when you try to be ignorant, like life has a way of kind of like laughing in your face and shoving it in your face, interestingly enough. But in Roger's case, it's because he's stressing about it. It's like, oh, he has a whole situation with Harper, but at the same time, it's just because it's like, well, by the time I like this new baby kind of steps into the picture, I'm going to be super old and everything. And so he's worried about that the entire time. But Avery is kind of like, well, the fact of the matter is, the happiest I've ever seen you is when you're about to have another child on the way. And like, this world could do with another like little Murtaugh, running around. So that was kind of pretty nice. Turns out it's not Trish's. Had a feeling it wasn't. I was like, is it Rihanna's? I'm like, it's not going to turn out to be Rihanna's. It's going to be the wrong trash or something. And it's like, oh no, like the reason it inadvertently ends up not being that case. But it was really nice hearing Rihanna be like, oh my God, you guys, she's like, you think I'm pregnant? Just because these jeans they shrunk in the washer? It's like, no. She's like, if I was pregnant, though, you guys would be the first one I'll come to. Like, you've literally done it 3 times. You're kind of an expert at this. And it's like, oh, well, Roger's like, oh, I'm good at what I do. And Tristan's like, oh, I'm good at what I do. She's like, and they're like, right. And it turns out, I was wondering, because it was just kind of interesting that he would just happen to run into McNeely at the beginning of the episode. I was like, what is that going to turn into? It's like, of course, it's actually his. Like, his wife is back. Now, interestingly enough, I interpret it this way, but that wasn't the case. Like, because in my head, I'm kind of an asshole because I'm pessimistic. There was a whole situation with his wife coming back. Obviously, she's the one that's pregnant. She just ended up, I guess, dumping it in their trash because she didn't want her husband to see it because she's trying to keep it secret. Which the whole situation is interesting considering like whole McNeely's son and Rihanna broke up. I mean, especially because he was was exactly cheating on her. But nevertheless, it's because like, oh, Luis was kind of on like a cruise or something like that, kind of a singles thing. And that's why it's kind of like, is that supposed to be kind of like suggesting that she was having an affair or something like that? Especially when he was like, oh, I had a vasectomy like 2 years ago. But it's like, all right, because those do have a tendency to fail for whatever reason. Was it Roger who had one too, or is that something else entirely? I don't remember that whole deal. I swear it was like, didn't Roger have a vasectomy, or am I thinking of something else? I feel like I'm thinking of something else. But nevertheless, I'm completely like skipping over the bit. Well, because that's interesting in itself because Roger was stressing so much, but now you have like McNeely kind of going through that same thing. So I think, arch rivals turn slightly good neighbors because they're kind of on slightly good terms now. I'm guessing Roger's kind of enjoying that potentially a little bit because it's like, oh, that stress is no longer on me. That stress is all on you, buddy. You go ahead home and you enjoy that. But the whole conversation, because like, it came out at the office and they had this little plant tree for, Roger, and it's like got condoms on it. It's like, oh, need a little protection in your life. They're like, enjoying it. Everyone's laughing and Roger's kind of ha, and he knocks it over and it smashes on the floor. And then Avery's like, what the hell? He's like, it turns out it's Rihanna's. And then, when he thought Rihanna was pregnant, and Avery's like, Scorsese, you're terrible. Making a joke like that. Scorsese's like, what the hell did I do? He's like, get back to the morgue. And he's trying to clean. He's like, don't even bother cleaning up. Get back to the morgue. It's like, I felt so bad for Scorsese. It was kind of a joke and all, meant to be, lighthearted and stuff like that. It just didn't work with the circumstance he was on. And I love that the moment he's about to leave, Bailey's like, oh, you might want to need some protection. And Roger's about to turn around and flip out, and Avery's like, just go. His eyes get wide and everything. But my favorite thing is the fact is that guy was like, okay, come on, Grant. He's like, come on, Grandpa. And the moment or Granddad, whichever the case may be, it made Roger snap, and Roger proceeded to kick his ass. And he's like, who told you? And it's just kind of like, wow, it was stressing him out that much that he kicked the dude's ass. I mean, yes, it was a bad guy, but still, it's just interesting that was kind of what fueled his fire for that fight. So, like I said, overall, a very good episode with all the things that kind of went down. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store with us, with some of these interesting developments. And now moving on to this week's episode of Bull. A great episode, but probably one of the most gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching episodes of Bull. Basically, this deals with a wife named Katie who was abused by her husband. He would, like, for a lot of their marriage, he would abuse her. And basically, she had enough at one point in time, and so she shoots him, killing him in his sleep. And not only that, she actually laid in bed next to him while he was dead. Which in retrospect is kind of like, we as the audience got to see kind of like a little bit of that. Sadly, like what she kind of went through. We saw that like her face was fine and then like hard cut to like after they quote unquote had sex just because that. And we see her face is messed up. It's just like, that sucks so much. She was trying to leave, but he came home before she could. And it ended, just things played out the way they did. And it's just like, for her, it's just like, she probably laid there because it's just like, she felt at peace for the first time in such a long time. So now this whole situation is Bull gets involved. And now it turns into a situation of like, she's guilt, like, you know, she killed him, like, you know, there's so many circumstances because it's kind of a sad, fucked up situation because of it being an abusive situation. Like, obviously, she never really reported a lot of the abuse. Any times there was something medical related to her situation of abuse, she went in under a different name at one point in time. So there are no witnesses. Obviously, she's cut off from a lot of people. And so she's, you know, the bruises are all over her body in places that she wears clothes. The bruises can't be seen, and he's got a reputation as being, Brian's got this reputation of being like, oh, he's an awesome guy, everyone likes him. So like it kind of turns into like almost like her word against his, and under these circumstances it doesn't look good because it's like, oh, you can't even say it was in a self-defense because you killed a man while he was asleep. But it's like, after all he had done, like, you know, she finally had enough, you know. And it's just, what's interesting is that this episode ties into something we learn about Bull this episode, is that Bull's sister, Jennifer, literally went to the exact same situation. She was in an abusive relationship and the guy killed her. And basically when he kicked her so hard, like I think one of her ribs fractured something. Like basically it inadvertently killed her, which Bull's never really brought his sister up before. I think there was like one time last season that he referenced her, but it's never been like, that's sad learning that about him. And that's something interesting about this case that makes it so personal for Bull, is because when he looks at her, because even the lady that Marina he was working with, she like, it seems like she had a connection to Bull's sister. Like that's how they know each other. That's how Bull and Marina know each other, because she works for like kind of an abuse kind of center situation. So she probably, the way the conversation seems like, it seems like she worked with Bull's sister on many occasions, or at least a few occasions. And because even when he saw Katie for the first time, she was like, yeah, oh, you know, it's almost crazy how similar it is. I guess it's kind of, because when Bull saw her, he couldn't help but, you know, think and see of his sister. Because for Bull, like, taking on this case meant giving Katie justice, but also, you know, maybe, and so it can make in his mind, it can make up for the fact is that he couldn't protect his own sister. He couldn't be there for her, you know. So, which even Marissa later on is like your sister made her choices. Like, you couldn't have done anything. Like, she was an adult. She made her own decisions, and things played out like that. Like, that Bull shouldn't kind of be so down on himself about that. You know, all he can do is do what he's doing now, and that's helping Katie, you know. Because even Benny was like, yeah, I got your back no matter what. This case is not the easiest thing, because it's like, well, we don't really know these people. Kind of Bull kind of jumped to take this case. He even fired her previous attorney, her court-appointed attorney, because he was like, well, she did it, so all we'll do is drop the charges. It's like, no, we need to get her proven innocent. We need to get her to be proven innocent because she is innocent. It's like, well, she shot him in the back. It's like, it doesn't, the fact of the matter is, you're like, it's like you're so focused on this one thing and not the outlying circumstances, the things that pushed her to do it in the first place. She didn't just do it out of nowhere, you know, but it's like, it didn't matter in this lawyer's eyes. And that's what pissed Bull off, because it's like, you're not even trying to help this one. Now I'm trying to get her justice. It's like, you're fired. He's like, what? Like, you never see Bull kind of get like that. Yeah, Bull might butt heads a lot of times with attorneys, but you've never seen him kind of like go full blown of like, no, we got this, go. You know, once again, it's just because he kind of got a little emotional with this. What's kind of interesting too is, I don't know if Cable ever found out. She never really brings it up in the episode, but she's the only one amongst the group who didn't know about. I mean, I wonder, did Chunk know? I mean, sure, like I said, eventually down the case, it probably came up between Cable and Chunk, even if they didn't know. But even Danny knew, and even Marissa's like, how do you know? Like, Danny's like, I wrote to the FBI. I made sure to kind of do a little homework on who I was coming to work with, and that's how she found out. Because the question became like, was Bull taking this case just, to take the case for this woman's sake, or is it just because when he looks at her, he sees his sister situation? So, and that's something that nobody wanted to touch. Because Cable started asking about it. Danny didn't want to talk about it. Marissa didn't want to talk about it, and neither did Benny. To be fair, it's a tough situation to talk about. Once again, it's a situation that's not too out there because Bull doesn't talk about his family, which is kind of interesting because there's a whole situation with Isabella that comes up this episode. To be fair, I think it has to do with next week's episode. I didn't look into it. Well, not next week's episode, but the next episode. I didn't look too much into it, but I was hearing some of the previous, a case that's very personal to Bull. So this might have something to do with it because Isabella called him multiple times, but when he tries to call her back, he never gets in contact. He's even asking Benny, what's up with that? And even Benny's like, I don't know. So. But this whole circumstance kind of focusing more on the case, it sucked because, like I said, there were no witnesses. And then even the ADA was kind of trying to paint it like, oh, it went both ways. It's like, oh, Brian might have been unfaithful, but so was she and stuff like that. It's like, wait, what? And it's like, oh, that there, because obviously there was no records of the abuse because she tried to run away before, but then he probably, the typical situations with this. It's like, oh yeah, I promise it'll never happen again. Everything's fine on his best behavior. And then he, hurts her. Because it seemed like the place he did it more so than anywhere was their apartment. It seemed like that was his little sanctum to be the little piece of shit that he was. I don't know what it was. Because like I said, he had this outward appearance of oh, I'm a good man. I'm the best. But it's when it came to her, I guess when it comes to a closed environment with her, when no one will know anything, this is our little hideaway. I can do whatever I want to you type of it pisses you off. And like I said, they're also being spun he was such a good person that in fact trying to make it seem like Katie was the abusive one. It's wait, what? Side note. I just checked my notes because I was wondering about it because I kept seeing her name's not Katie, it's Kate. I'm sorry, I kept doing that. So, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's not that big of a deal, but just it just bothered me because I kept thinking in my back of my head that was wrong. But nevertheless, getting back to the point I was trying to make, the fact is that he tried to spin it like that just sucks. Because the thing is, in her case, I guess because she kind of kept so cut off from her family, because when it came time to it, she didn't want to have her family there. But the problem was, Brian's entire family was there. Even his sister went on the stand. Because for her, it's oh, I thought you guys were such a beautiful couple. But then Benny started pointing out some things whoa, did you ever go over to the place? It's oh, did they ever invite you? Oh, the fact is that Kate always wore sleeve clothes covering stuff up, this and that. She would never see her in bathing suits and stuff like that because, or that anytime you would talk to Kate, he'd always be nearby because he'd always want to control the conversation to make sure that Kate wasn't saying something she didn't have no business saying. So, because no one else in Brian's family knew about it because in her situation, like I said, it's a tough situation. She didn't go to help for anyone just because because the sad thing is in those situations, you always make excuses well, he promised he wasn't going to do this, wasn't going to do that. For a little while, things were okay, so I believed him, because even she kind of goes well, because on some level, maybe, it seems like she was saying that she kind of started believing a lot of the stuff that he said about her, or the bad ways he talked about her. On some level, maybe she felt like she deserved it, that's why she stayed. But finding out that she was pregnant was one of millions of reasons to finally just kind of push her over the edge to do what she did. Because what ultimately ended up happening, it was basically a student who got to know a little bit. The student, she came across Brian's situation with Kate. She didn't see it, but she overheard it. And just the way he talked down to her and laughed oh, you go to the police, I will kill you thing. And then when Brian walked past the student, he didn't say anything. And for the student, she feels so bad because she just transferred, but she never said anything. She never told anyone about those circumstances. And she feels like maybe if she had spoken up, maybe things would be different for Kate. Maybe these circumstances would be different. Even learned that fucker was even considering trying to put a restraining order against her. But apparently the way Benny was talking to the officer, it's kind of yeah, in some occasions that happens, which is what? I hope that's not really a thing, because that'd be so fucking heartbreaking to know that that's really a thing where someone's like, oh yeah, I'm scared about this person physically harming me, even though I'm the physical abuser in this situation. It's like, God, tell me that's not like a real thing. I don't mean just within the show. I mean like a real thing in real life. That'd just be like, it's one of those kind of like fuck the world type of things. I like, humanity sucks, you know? So, but probably one of my favorite moments, I think it was like a heartfelt moment. I felt like that was needed for both, Bull and for Kay. Is like he hugs her. He's like, don't let go. He's like, this could go either one of two ways. The fact of the matter is, we could win, and if we do, we're going to take a walk because walking's good for a pregnant lady. And he's like, but if it don't, because for Bull, this was kind of an all or nothing gamble. It's like, he put her, like, all the charges were put to like first degree murder, and if she was convicted, she would go away for life. Obviously, they were aiming for second degree, but it's like for Bull, he was trying to take the gamble of like, no, I'm going to prove her innocent. So like, because I don't want any other charges like trying to like be stuck on her. So it's just like this one charge. It's an all out gamble essentially, So. And he promised her, it's like, even if things go bad, we're going to appeal like hell. It's going to get to the point that you get sick of me. She's like, I doubt that. He's like, well, you don't know me. I'm very good at people get, making people detest me. Just like this sweet, heartwarming moment of just like, because she, for such a long time, she finally had someone in her corner. She didn't have to deal with this whole situation alone. She had someone backing her up. And luckily, things came back not guilty. I'm like, yes! It felt good because it's like, it felt right, and it's like, Bull talked about getting in contact with her family for helping, her child, so. But, because the last thing we see in the episode is like him looking at a sign that was, saying in memoriam to his sister Jennifer. So, like, I think helping Kate kind of, it's still a tough spot, but I think it did something. I think it made him feel good. Like, it's like, I don't know, that he was able to help someone in a similar circumstance, it just, it's like he prevented a situation he helped make a situation that was very similar to his sister kind of end out better. I don't know, it's really hard to kind of put it into words what I'm trying to say, but hopefully you kind of understand what I'm trying to say. Like I said, it's just like, this was just one of those episodes of everything that's happened, especially the intro is just kind of like, you can't watch it and you're just kind of like, man, that's just gut wrenching and just terrible. Because you figured that's where it was going to go, especially when she had the gun and everything. I figured that's what the whole case was going to be about, her killing her husband. I didn't know it was going to be under the circumstances like killing him while he was sleeping like that. I thought like she was going to go grab the gun or something. I don't know, like sooner, but nevertheless. Kind of it's kind of still kind of shitty note, but not nearly as shitty. There's kind of this other subplot to this episode that dealt with the whole, Chunk situation. It's still dealing with the whole situation where his professor like fails him and stuff like that, which is still kind of like, what the hell is up with that? He still kind of treats Chunk like bad, like, because even Chunk's like, is it just because of where I work, or is there more to it than that? But his professor's like, oh yeah, you never have to see me, I'll never have to see you, so let's leave it at that. It's like, you want to be complete and utter dick. At the same time, it's one of those situations, depending on what teacher, like, he's got just like a stick up his butt because he doesn't like the whole tax situation. Because in his mind, it's like, oh, you make a mockery of the courtroom type of thing, especially because Chunk's trying to be a lawyer, and it's like, oh, like, it's like he has such a hard on for trying to take Chunk down. Like, I don't know why, beyond just like what Chunk does and everything. So ultimately, we'll have to wait and see if any of that kind of comes back in the next episode. It does seem like that is a recurring storyline. Like I said, I do have a feeling that the whole Isabella situation might be what we might be dealing with in the next episode, whatever that may be. We still don't know what it is exactly, but we'll see. I was trying to correct myself earlier because there won't be an episode next week. There will be one the week after next, so do keep that in mind. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.